You ever wish you had, like, a cheat code for understanding really complex stuff? Like, you could just instantly grasp the important bits without spending hours wading through dense material?
Yeah,
Well,
definitely.
that's kind of the idea behind what we do here, a deep dive designed to give you exactly that shortcut to being well informed, maybe with a few surprising discoveries along the way.
And today you've brought us into a fascinating and, frankly, quite specialized area,
Hmm.
the study of vital points. We'll be digging into insights from Rick Clark's 1994 seminars, using notes put together by Danny Abramovich and Susan Alters.
Right.
What's particularly interesting is seeing the connections Clark made to Suro Maikane's PSNA class, and even Clark's own book, Martial Arts for the University.
Exactly. Because for you, our listener who's always looking to absorb knowledge efficiently, thoroughly, this is right up your alley. We're not going to get lost in the weeds. Our mission for this deep dive is to pull out the core info about specific vital points on the arm and hand, where to find them, how to, exer the term, that's the Russian term for influence or affect them.
What the potential consequences might be. And crucially, we're approaching all of this with a real emphasis on safety.
Safety is absolutely paramount here. I mean, when we're discussing techniques that can have real physiological effects, proceeding with caution and understanding the established guidelines is just essential.
Yeah.
The notes from Rick Clark's work, they clearly lay out some fundamental safety rules right at the start, and those are definitely where we should begin.
Okay, let's unpack these safety guidelines first, because this is really the foundation for understanding anything else we talk about. One of the first things Clark emphasizes is that you should never strike pressure points on anyone over the age of 40. That's a pretty definitive rule, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And it likely reflects, a consideration for the increased potential for underlying health conditions, maybe undiagnosed stuff in that age group, things that could be negatively impacted.
Makes sense. Similarly, the guideline against striking points on individuals under the influence of drugs, legal or illegal, it aims to avoid unpredictable physiological responses. It just complicates things too much.
Right. Too many unknown factors. Then there's the never cross points rule.
Yeah.
This one's intriguing. It basically means if you're focusing on vital points on, say, the left arm,
Uh-huh.
you shouldn't immediately start working on points on the right arm or anywhere else for that matter. Legs, body, there needs to be like a 20-minute gap.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that 20-minute waiting period is the implication that hitting one area has a systemic effect. It needs time to dissipate before you target another area. Kind of hints at a deeper understanding of the body's interconnectedness. Maybe neurological, maybe energetic, even though the notes don't spell out the exact mechanisms.
Right. And the safety rules continue. No striking on individuals who are in poor health or have congenital health issues. That seems like common sense, doesn't it?
Definitely. You wouldn't want to risk making something worse.
Plus, the notes specify that practice of these techniques should be limited to only 15 minutes per week. Maximum. That really underscores the potential potency, even of light contact, right? It's not about endless repetition like building muscle memory.
Exactly. It suggests that even subtle stimulation can have lasting effects,
Hmm.
and too much practice could be counterproductive, maybe even harmful.
Right.
And the rule about fully understanding the consequences before you even think about striking, that's critical. This isn't something to mess around with casually.
And when it comes to practice itself, the notes stress using only the lightest tap. We're talking minimal force, just enough to find the spot and gently stimulate it.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, and this is absolutely key, all practice must be supervised by a qualified instructor.
Mhm.
This isn't something you should be trying out on your own, based on a podcast or some notes you read.
No way. These comprehensive safety guidelines, they really illustrate a discipline that demands a high degree of respect, diligent study, and responsible application. It's about recognizing the potential power here and using that knowledge carefully. So, with those crucial safety parameters firmly in mind, let's dive into some specific points on the arm. Shall we start with lung 7?
Okay, lung 7. The notes describe its location as about 1 inch up from the hand. On the radial side, that's the thumb side of the arm. Figure A in our reference material shows this. Now, here's a neat trick for finding it. Do a handshake.
Okay.
If you extend your index finger, you should be able to feel their pulse right there on the inside of the radius bone, like figure B shows. Gives you a pretty accurate landmark.
Huh. It's interesting how it integrates like a common social thing as a practical way to find an anatomical point. It speaks to that principle within these teachings, using everyday movements for precise targeting.
Exactly. The notes then describe a specific cross-hand grab to apply pressure. Your thumb goes right onto lung 7, while the flat of your hand provides counterpressure on the back of their wrist, kind of like figure C and D. A key element here is a rotational movement with a squeeze.
Right.
And a really important detail is how you apply pressure. Use the bony side of your thumb, shown in figure F, not the softer, padded bottom part in figure E. Apparently, the bony bit allows for more focused, effective.
Yeah. From a biomechanical standpoint, that makes sense. The smaller, more rigid surface area of the bony part concentrates the force onto a more localized point, likely maximizing the stimulation of the nerves underneath.
Right. The intended effect of this pressure, done correctly, is pain that should cause the person to drop down. And in a martial context, this kind of grip can be a very effective lead-in for Shihonage, the four directions throw.
So it's not just about pain for compliance. It's also about disrupting their balance, creating a tactical advantage for what comes next.
Precisely. Now, lung 7 can also be targeted with a strike. The notes mention using a shudo, a knife hand strike, or a back fist,
Yeah.
or even that bony protrusion on the back of the wrist we just talked about, figure G. And the angle of the strike is absolutely crucial. It needs to be directed back and at a 45-degree angle relative to the arm you're hitting, moving from their elbow towards their hand, as shown in figure H.
That consistent 45-degree angle across multiple techniques, it suggests it might be an optimal vector for hitting the nerve or vascular pathways there, maximizing the force transfer.
And here's a potentially very useful side effect. A strike to lung 7 can cause the hand to involuntarily open. So in self-defense, if someone's got a death grip on you, a sharp strike there might just break their hold.
That's a practical application, yeah.
Yeah.
Immediate implications for escaping a grab.
Mm-mm.
Okay, so let's move on to another lung point highlighted in the notes.
Right. This second lung point is also on the forearm. Specifically, it's at the intersection of the radius bone. And the muscle that wraps over it, figures, and B show this. The notes give a clear way to find it. Have someone make a muscle with their forearm.
Okay.
You just follow the radius bone up until you feel where it meets that contracting muscle. The point is right at that junction, C, figure C.
Again, the emphasis is on using a mix of anatomy knowledge and a simple physical action muscle contraction to find the target precisely.
Exactly. Now, this point can be influenced through a rolling action. You use that bony protrusion on your own wrist, figure E, almost like a tool. You start on the underside of their arm and then roll around to this intersection, like in figure D. The notes specifically say start underneath to make sure you get direct contact with the point.
The rolling action. It likely creates sustained pressure and friction against the tissues underneath, potentially stimulating mechanoreceptors or disrupting nerve signals in that area.
And the effect of this rolling. According to the notes, the recipient often just drops straight down. Now, this point can also be struck, again, using either that bony wrist protrusion or a back fist. And maybe unsurprisingly by now, the angle is critical, 45 degrees downward and backward towards their wrist.
The recurrence of that 45-degree angle. It really reinforces its potential significance as a key principle for hitting arm points in this system.
Interestingly, the effect of striking this point directed towards the fingers at that same 45-degree angle is that it can make it very difficult for the person to make a fist.
Wow.
The notes even suggest that if they then try to hit something hard with that hand within, the next 20 minutes or so, they could actually injure their hand. That's a pretty significant potential consequence from hitting this point.
It really shows how disrupting neuromuscular control in one spot can have downstream effects on function and vulnerability elsewhere, like impacting hand dexterity and increasing injury risk if the limb's used improperly.
And finally, a very practical note. This point is mentioned as being particularly effective on people with well-developed muscles, because it's actually quite hard for even big muscles to fully protect this specific spot.
That's a valuable tactical insight. Yeah, even significant muscle mass might not protect all vulnerable anatomical locations. Okay, let's move on to lung 5.
All right, lung 5. This one's located about 3/4 of an inch below the elbow crease. You're looking for a ropey, sinewy muscle on the top of the forearm. Figure A shows it.
Okay.
The notes explain you can access it by reaching with your opposite hand and digging your thumb underneath that distinct muscle, like in figure B.
So being able to feel and isolate that specific muscle is key to finding lung 5 accurately.
And consistent with what we've seen, this point can also be struck with a crosshand motion, again using that bony protrusion on the wrist, figure D. And you guessed it, the strike follows that familiar 45-degree downward and backward angle towards the wrist, figure C.
The repetition of this striking method and angle across different points just further emphasizes its potential effectiveness in this system.
Now, the described effects of striking lung 5, detailed in figure E, are quite extensive and interconnected. First, the struck arm will tend to bend. Second, Maybe more surprisingly, the person's leg on the unstruck side often buckles or opens up,
Yeah.
potentially creating an opportunity for a leg break. That's a fascinating crossbody effect,
It
isn't it?
really suggests a neurological link where stimulating this point on one side impacts motor control and stability on the opposite limb.
Exactly. Third, the person's body and head tend to move forward, and their chin often turns away from the arm that was hit. This repositioning, in turn, can expose vulnerable points on the neck.
Mhm.
Fourth, the hand on the arm that wasn't struck will often open, and that unstruck arm will straighten out and move backward. It's almost like a chain reaction triggered by hitting this single point.
It really paints a picture of a highly integrated system where hitting one key spot can create a cascade of movements and vulnerabilities throughout the body, disrupting balance, exposing other targets, inhibiting function.
And there's more to lung 5. The notes mention that striking it at a 45-degree angle to the outside of the body can specifically set up the arm for a break using the Golgi tendon reflex, that press point above the elbow we'll get to shortly. So it's not just an immediate effect, but also a strategic setup for the next technique.
Yeah, it highlights the layered nature of these techniques where one action creates an opportunity for further manipulation.
Precisely. And in a simultaneous attack scenario, the note suggests lung 5 and lung 7 can be struck together using the drawing or chambering motion of a double knife hand block. Then the forward motion of the block targets those newly exposed neck points. It's like a 2-for-1 in terms of creating openings.
That really speaks to efficiency of movement and the tactical thinking behind these combinations, maximizing the impact of a single action. Now, let's turn our attention to large intestine 11.
Okay, large intestine 11. This point is on the opposite side of the forearm from lung 5, as figure A shows. And here's a clever anatomical pairing for efficiency. The notes explain it can often be found at the same time as lung 5.
Oh, really?
Yeah, as you reach for lung 5 with your thumb, your index finger naturally falls right onto large intestine 11, figure B. It's under that same ropey muscle or tendon across the top of the forearm.
Huh. That concurrent accessibility makes perfect sense in a dynamic situation where you might not have time to carefully feel for each point individually.
Exactly. Now, large intestine 11 can be used as a push point for control, or it can be struck effectively with a back fist. And, as we might guess, the recommended angle for the strike is back down towards the fingers at 45 degrees. The notes also mention it can be struck with an elbow, like during a downward block.
The fact that this point responds to both sustained pressure and a strike suggests different types of stimuli can effectively hit the underlying structures.
And here's a key detail that amps up the effect. The notes indicate the impact of a strike to large intestine 11 is significantly increased if you are firmly grabbing the lung points on the arm at the same time.
Ah,
It's like creating a feedback loop or just a more intense overall stimulation.
that synergistic effect between nearby points really underscores the body's interconnectedness.
Yeah, stimulating multiple related points at once can often give a much more pronounced response than hitting just one point alone.
The primary effect of striking large intestine 11, according to the notes, is a numbing sensation in the arm. Obviously, in a fight, a numb limb is a huge disadvantage.
Yeah, numbness usually implies a disruption of nerve function, potentially affecting both feeling and motor control in that area.
And in a practical scenario, if an opponent has their arm up guarding, a well-placed back fist to this point could cause them to involuntarily drop their arm, creating an opening. The notes even mention Bill DeWard apparently used this point in sparring to set up a scissor takedown, showing its real-world martial use. Okay, let's move on to Heart 7. Heart 7 is located on the opposite side of the wrist from that first thumb point, lung 7. Specifically, it's just below the wrist bone on the pinky finger side of the forearm, like in figure A.
And here's another chance for simultaneous targeting. The notes describe a wrist grab that can hit both heart 7 and lung 7 at the same time. You do this by pressing both your thumbs into heart 7, using the sides of your thumbs for focused pressure, while your fingers grip lung 7 simultaneously. It's like a two-pronged attack on the wrist.
That simultaneous engagement of two distinct points so close together really maximizes the potential for controlling the wrist joint and getting a stronger overall response.
The notes state that pressing on heart 7 can control and bend the wrist, making it particularly useful for wrist locks and throws. So its use goes beyond just pain. It allows for direct manipulation of the joint's mechanics. Now let's discuss the Golgi's tendon point, also called the ulna press point.
Right. This is a different type of point, a press point, not a striking target, located right above the back of the elbow. Figure C shows it. And the notes make a very important distinction. Striking this specific point has no real effect.
That's crucial info. So it's all about a different kind of, well, influence. The notes explain that firmly rubbing this point with your knuckles will cause involuntary muscle relaxation. That's the main effect you want.
Yeah, the Golgi tendon reflex is a fascinating physiological thing. These sensory receptors are in tendons near the muscle-tendon junction. They're sensitive to changes in muscle tension. When you apply sustained pressure, like rubbing, it stimulates these receptors, sends a signal to the central nervous system that inhibits muscle contraction, leading to that relaxation you mentioned.
Exactly. And this induced relaxation, the notes emphasize, effectively sets up the arm for applying locks or brakes, like in figures D and E. So it's a preparatory move to reduce resistance, not a direct attack itself.
It's a way to temporarily override the muscle's natural resistance to being stretched or manipulated, making joint locks and breaks significantly easier and safer to apply.
The notes give several practical examples of how this Golgi tendon press point can be used. Against either a same side or a cross-hand wrist grab, you can respond with a downward block, simultaneously getting your knuckles or ulna bone onto this pressure point and applying rolling pressure to help drop the opponent.
So the defensive block becomes an offensive move too, seamlessly integrating the vital point manipulation.
Right. Another example, if you control their wrist with a cross-hand grip and then use your adjacent arm for a cage tsuki, that short hook punch the radius bone of your punching arm can hit this Golgi tendon point on their arm, intentionally or not. Similarly, holding their wrist crosshand, using your adjacent hand for an A-juke riving block can help facilitate breaking their arm, presumably by using that induced relaxation to overcome their resistance. And finally, the notes mention that during various down blocks, the non-blocking hand can secure their wrist and simultaneously press this key point above their elbow. It seems like a highly adaptable technique you can weave into a lot of movements.
It truly highlights that principle of maximizing efficiency, using every part of the body in every action to create tactical advantages through layered techniques.
Now, there's one final Heart 7 point mentioned in the notes with a slightly different location and application method.
Yes, this variation involves cupping your cross hand underneath your opponent's elbow joint. This position naturally puts your thumb in a prime spot to press on this specific version of the Heart 7 point.
And the precise location is described as being about 3 to 4 inches down from the elbow joint towards their body on the inside of the arm. The notes offer a helpful guide. If their pinky finger is pointing right at you, this specific Heart 7 point will be on that imaginary line.
That provides a clear, easily visualized landmark to ensure accurate targeting of this sensitive spot.
The notes suggest lightly tapping this point with your knuckles from underneath as one way to affect it. Alternatively, if you're holding their right arm with your right hand, you can strike with a left back fist. The crucial angle for this strike is noted as 45 degrees directed towards the outside of their arm.
Again, that 45-degree angle pops up, reinforcing its potential importance. The outward direction of the strike likely targets specific nerve or vascular structures running along that path.
The potential effects linked to this particular Heart 7 point are described as quite significant. Pressing it can numb the entire arm, and the notes even mention the possibility stressing the extreme seriousness of a strike potentially causing a heart attack. They also point out that if you hit this point after or along with hitting other vital points, the effect can be dramatically amplified.
Yeah, the potential for such a severe physiological response just underscores how critical it is to follow those strict safety guidelines we talked about at the start. Techniques with this level of potential effect demand the utmost caution and respect.
Absolutely. The notes also detail secondary effects from striking this point towards the fingers. It can create an opening to attack and potentially break the opponent's opposite knee, and it can also leave the neck vulnerable for a knockout. That's another striking example of those cross-body connections.
It really highlights the systemic consequences of hitting these key anatomical spots, with effects manifesting far from the initial contact point.
Finally, the notes outline several self-defense uses for this specific Heart 7 point, including using it against a rear strangle, followed by throws like ippanseoi or uki-otoshi. It can also be used against a rear hand choke, again leading into an ippansoi, or struck with defensive moves like yuryuk forearm block, or offensive ones like keijutsuki, that short hook punch. It seems to be a strategically important point in a wide range of scenarios.
It really demonstrates how vital point manipulation is integrated as a core component of broader martial arts strategies, significantly boosting their effectiveness in various situations.
Okay, so we've done a pretty thorough deep dive into these specific vital points on the arm and hand. We've looked at their precise locations, different ways to drive in. from grabs and rolls to strikes and presses and the potential effects, always keeping those absolutely crucial safety guidelines front and center.
As you've highlighted, yeah, the key takeaways really are the level of precision needed to find these points and the significant role the angle of attack plays in activating them. It's not just about hitting anywhere on the arm. It's about accurate anatomical targeting for the desired physiological response.
And those safety precautions from Rick Clark's work, they just cannot be emphasized enough, right? This kind of knowledge carries a serious responsibility.
Indeed it does. It prompts a fascinating question, maybe for you, our listener.
Mhm.
What does it reveal about the intricate design of the human body that such specific, seemingly small spots can have such profound and far-reaching effects?
Mm.
It really makes you consider the complex interplay of nerves, muscles, maybe even more subtle pathways that make up our physical selves, and the depth of knowledge embedded in these martial arts traditions. Perhaps this exploration has sparked your own curiosity to think about the hidden vulnerabilities and surprising resilience of the human form.